People have been getting hurt for as long as people have existed, by each other, by circumstances, by the gap between what they wanted and what arrived, by the loss of things they were certain would stay, by the behavior of people they trusted not to do the thing they did. And for as long as people have been getting hurt, some people have been figuring out how to get hurt less, not by becoming cold, not by caring about nothing, not by building the kind of armor that keeps everything out, including the things worth letting in, but by understanding something about pain that most people never stop long enough to examine, that most of the hurt you experience is not caused by what happens to you. It is caused by what you believe about what happens to you, and what you believe can be changed. This is not a modern discovery. This is one of the oldest insights available in the history of human thought, figured out in ancient Greece, refined in Rome, practiced by slaves and emperors alike, written down in documents that survived centuries because what they contained was too useful to lose. The insight survived because it works, not in a comfortable way, in the specific, honest, unglamorous way that the things that actually work tend to work, through understanding, through practice, through the deliberate cultivation of a specific relationship with the events of your life that determines how much they can hurt you. That is what this is about. Here is the first thing you need to understand, and this is the foundation on which everything else in this script rests. There is a distinction that changes everything, the distinction between what is in your control and what is not. This sounds simple. It is not simple. Most people believe they understand this distinction, and then spend the majority of their emotional energy on things outside their control, worrying about outcomes they cannot determine, rehearsing conversations with people who will say what they will say regardless of the rehearsal, suffering over other people's opinions, grieving over circumstances that cannot be changed, resisting what has already happened. All of that emotional energy deployed against things that cannot be affected by the deployment produces nothing except the suffering itself. The ancient insight says this: there are things in your control, your judgments, your intentions, your responses, your values, your effort, and there are things outside your control. Everything else, other people's behavior, other people's opinions, outcomes, circumstances, the past, the future, the weather, your health in many respects, whether the thing you built works, whether the person you loved stayed. The invitation is not to stop caring about the second category. It is to stop placing your well-being inside it, because anything placed inside the second category is held hostage by circumstances outside your control. And held hostage is not a stable position to build a life from. But here is what you are missing about this distinction. It is not a thought exercise. It is a daily, moment-by-moment, high-stakes practice, because the mind, left to its own devices, does not naturally sort events into these categories. It naturalizes the external. It treats whatever is happening as the cause of whatever is felt. Someone is rude to you, and the rudeness is experienced as the cause of the hurt. The outcome did not go as planned, and the outcome is experienced as the cause of the disappointment. The person left and the leaving is experienced as the cause of the grief. In each case, the external event is assigned causal power over the internal experience, and as long as the external event holds causal power, you are at the mercy of external events, which means you are at the mercy of everything. The Stoic insight says something different. The external event is not the cause. The judgment about the external event is the cause. Between the event and the feeling is a thought, a rapid, often unconscious evaluation of what the event means, whether it is bad, whether it threatens something you value, whether it is just, whether it is permanent, whether it changes something important. That evaluation is the cause of the feeling, not the event, and the evaluation is in your control in a way the event is not. Here is where the ancient Stoics said something genuinely radical. Things are not good or bad. Thinking makes them so, not in a dismissive way, not in the way of telling someone their pain is not real, in the specific, precise, psychologically profound way that says the pain is real, but what is producing it is not the thing. It is the meaning you assign to the thing. Here is what this means. Someone says something critical about your work. The event, words were spoken about something you made. The meaning you assign. This is evident evidence that I am not capable, that my work is not good enough, that the effort was wasted, that the people whose opinion matters see through me. The feeling produced, shame, deflation, the specific hurt of being found inadequate. Now, the words are the same. The event is the same. Different meaning. This person has a perspective on my work. It may be accurate in some ways and inaccurate in others. It is one person's view. What in it is useful to me? The feeling produced something more like mild interest, mild curiosity, the specific neutral engagement of someone assessing information rather than absorbing the verdict. Same event, completely different experience, because completely different experience, because completely different meaning. The meaning was not determined by the event. It was assigned to the event, and what is assigned can be assigned differently. Now here's the part most people find most difficult, and it is the part that makes all the difference between the person who understands this intellectually and the person who actually lives it. Changing the meaning requires catching it before it lands, because the meaning does not arrive slowly. It arrives fast, faster than the conscious mind, before the evaluation has had time to be evaluated. The judgment about the event arrives with the event, already loaded, already charged, already producing the feeling before you have had a chance to examine whether the judgment is accurate. This is not a flaw. This is how the meaning-making system works. Pattern recognition, rapid categorization, the assignment of meaning based on previous experience with similar events, and the previous experience that built those patterns was not always accurate, was not always useful, was not always from conditions that resemble the current one. But the patterns run anyway, because they always have, because they are wired. The practice, then, is not to prevent the judgment. It is to catch it after it arrives, but before it has fully run. To notice a judgment just arrived. To ask, is this judgment accurate? Is the meaning I just assigned to this event the one that would be assigned by someone with full information and genuine perspective? Or is this the automatic meaning, the one built from old patterns and old conditions? That question, asked in the gap between the event and the full formation of the feeling, is where the ancient practice actually lives. Here is something about the Stoics specifically, because this is not abstract philosophy. The Stoics were people dealing with the same things you are dealing with. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the known world and spent his nights writing reminders to himself about how to stay grounded, how to not be moved by flattery, how to treat the rude person with patience rather than retaliation, how to face the possibility of his own death with equanimity, how to keep his values intact in conditions designed to erode them. Epictetus was a slave. He had no freedom over his circumstances, no ability to change his external conditions in any significant way, and he developed, from within those conditions, the clearest articulation of what it means to have genuine freedom, the freedom that cannot be taken away, the freedom of what you decide something means, what you choose to value, how you choose to respond. The slave was freer than most people who have never been in chains, because he understood something about freedom that most people never examine, that the freedom that matters is the internal one, and the internal freedom is available regardless of external conditions. That insight is not comfortable, because it removes the excuse of circumstances. If the slave could maintain his freedom, what excuse is available to you? None that holds. Here is the midpoint truth. The ancient trick is not a trick, it is a discipline. The word trick implies something effortless, something that, once known, requires no ongoing work. This is not that. The Stoic practice is a discipline in the original sense, a daily, sustained, deliberate effort to apply the understanding to the actual conditions of an actual life. Not once, not when it is easy, in the specific moments when the event has arrived and the automatic meaning has been assigned, and the feeling is already forming and everything in you wants to accept the automatic version because the alternative requires effort. The discipline is the choice, made in that moment, to examine the meaning rather than accept it, to ask whether the pain is coming from the event or from a judgment about the event that could be assessed differently, to locate what is actually in your control and direct your energy there rather rather than into the things that are not. This discipline does not produce freedom from pain. It produces freedom within pain. The pain is still real. The loss is still genuine. The difficulty is still hard. But the suffering, which is the pain multiplied by the resistance to it, can be reduced because the resistance is a choice, and choices with practice can be changed. Let us talk about the specific application, because the philosophy is not useful without the practice, and the practice has specific entry points. The first is the voluntary discomfort exercise. The Stoics practice deliberately choosing small discomforts, not as self-punishment, as training. Fasting for a day to discover that hunger is survivable. Wearing simple clothing to discover that comfort is not a requirement for equanimity. Sleeping without the usual comforts occasionally to discover that the body can function without them. The purpose was specific, to discover through experience rather than theory that what felt like a requirement was actually a preference, that the absence of what felt necessary did not produce the catastrophe the mind predicted. This matters because most suffering is not produced by actual catastrophe. It is produced by the fear that the absence of something important will be catastrophic, and the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort is a systematic method of testing that fear against reality, of discovering, in controlled conditions, that the thing you were afraid of losing would not destroy you if it were lost, that you are more resilient than the untested mind believes, that the catastrophe, confronted rather than feared, is almost always smaller than the catastrophe feared. The second practice is the negative visualization. This sounds counterintuitive in a culture that recommends positive visualization, but the Stoics understood something about human psychology that positive visualization misses. The mind adapts to whatever is present. The good things in your life right now, if they have been present long enough, have been adapted to. They are the background, the expected, the things that would only be noticed in their absence, the relationship, the health, the people, the circumstances. You have adapted to them, and adaptation produces a specific kind of blindness to what is actually valuable. The negative visualization interrupts the adaptation, not by dwelling on moss, by briefly, deliberately, imagining the absence of what is present. What would today look like without this person? What would this moment be without this capacity? What would this life feel like without this thing I currently take for granted? The brief, honest imagining of the absence produces something the comfortable presence cannot. The specific, vivid, felt recognition of the value of what is actually here, not as a reminder, as a genuine experience of gratitude that the adaptation had made unavailable. And gratitude, genuinely felt rather than performed, is one of the most reliable antidotes to the specific suffering produced by wanting what is not here rather than experiencing what is. The third practice is the view from above. The Stoics used a specific mental exercise. Imagine seeing your situation from a great height, not from the ground where it is overwhelming and immediate and consuming. From above, from the height where the situation is visible in its context, where the scale of what feels enormous becomes clear, where the permanence of what feels permanent becomes questionable, where the importance of what feels crucial can be assessed against the larger picture. This is not dismissal. It is not telling yourself that your problems do not matter. It is the deliberate recovery of the perspective that the intensity of the immediate situation removes. From the ground, the argument feels like the relationship. From above, the argument is an event in a relationship that has years of history and genuine care. From the ground, the failure feels like the end of something. From above, the failure is a moment in a process that has more steps. From the ground, the loss feels permanent. From above, the loss is located in time. Before it, the thing was there. After it, life continues and shapes into something different. The view from above does not make the ground-level pain false. It makes it proportionate, and proportionate pain is more bearable than pain that fills the entire visible world. Here is something about the specific application to other people. Because most pain is relational, most of the hurt that the ancient trick is most needed for is not from circumstances, it is from people, what they said, what they did, what they chose, what they failed to be. The Stoic application to relational pain is specific. Other people will do what other people do. This is not cynicism. It is the accurate observation that other people are operating according to their own nature, their own history, their own current state, their own values and fears and patterns, and their behavior is determined by those things, not by whether you deserve better, not by the quality of what you have given, not by what would be fair or right or what a reasonable person would do, by who they are and what they have and where they are right now. The person who hurt you did not do it because of you. They did it because of them, their limitations, their patterns, their current capacity for the thing you needed, which in many cases was simply not sufficient, not because you were not worth it, because they did not have it to give. Understanding this does not require you to accept the behavior. It does not require forgiveness in any particular time frame. It does not mean the hurt was not real. It removes the part of the hurt that was not about what happened, the part that was about what it meant about your worth, about whether you are someone who deserves to be treated well, about whether the world is a place where you are safe. That part is the assigned meaning, and that meaning, examined honestly against the actual evidence, almost always does not hold. What someone else did is almost never evidence about your worth. It is evidence about their current capacity, and that is a much smaller thing to carry. Here is something about attachment and the Stoic approach, because this is where most people resist the ancient wisdom most strongly. The Stoic position on attachment is often misunderstood as cold, as the recommendation to care about nothing in order to be hurt by nothing. That is not what it says. Here is what it actually says. Love deeply, invest genuinely, care fully, and hold everything you love lightly, not loosely in the sense of not really caring, lightly in the sense of not requiring it to be permanent in order to justify the caring. The Stoics observed something genuinely difficult about human experience. Everything you love is temporary, not as a morbid observation, as a factual one. The people you love will leave or will be left. The things you value will change or be lost. The circumstances you depend on will shift. This is not cause for despair. It is the condition of having things worth caring about in a world where nothing is permanent. And the Stoic response to this condition is not to care less. It is to love what you have while you have it, to be fully present in it, to not defer the appreciation until the loss arrives, to experience the value of what is here now rather than taking it for granted until it is gone. The temporariness is not the tragedy. The tragedy is treating temporary things as permanent, which prevents the full experience of them while they are present and produces a specific kind of shock when they leave that the honest acknowledgement of their temporariness would have softened. Hold lightly, love fully. These are not contradictions. They are the Stoic synthesis. Let us talk about the practice of journaling that the Stoics used, because Marcus Aurelius did not write his reflections for publication. He wrote them for himself every day in the evenings, a practice of honest self-examination, not to track his successes, to examine his failures, to catch the places where his values had been compromised, where his responses had been driven by something other than what he actually believed, where the automatic had run when the deliberate should have. He asked 3 questions essentially. What did I do today? What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Not as self-punishment, as the honest taking of stock required to actually improve rather than just intend to. And here is what the practice produced. Not a person without flaws, a person with increasing awareness of their flaws. An awareness brought consistently to the specific places where the pattern runs is what changes patterns. Not the grand resolution, not the dramatic commitment, the daily honest examination, the specific naming of what happened and what could have been different, applied consistently over years until the pattern is visible enough and the alternative practiced enough that the old response response begins to lose its automatic quality. That is how the ancient wisdom actually produced change, not through reading it, through practicing it daily, imperfectly, for a long time. Here is something about emotions specifically, because the Stoic tradition has been misrepresented as requiring the suppression of emotion. It does not. The Stoics distinguished between passions and rational emotions. Passions are the automatic, unexamined emotional responses, the ones that arrive before the evaluation, that are driven by the judgment before the judgment has been examined. Grief about the thing assigned as terrible before considering whether it is actually terrible. Anxiety about the outcome assigned as catastrophic before considering whether it would actually be catastrophic. Rage about the injustice assigned as an attack before considering whether an attack was actually intended. These passions, driven by unexamined judgments, are what the Stoics worked to reduce. Not because emotions are bad, because unexamined emotions based on inaccurate judgments produce unnecessary suffering. Rational emotions are different. Joy at genuine good, the appropriate sadness of genuine loss, the appropriate anger at genuine injustice. These are not suppressed. They are the natural response of someone with an accurate relationship with reality. The Stoic practice does not produce a person who feels nothing. It produces a person who feels what is actually warranted by the actual situation, not by the catastrophized version, not by the worst-case interpreted version, by what is actually there. And feeling what is actually there rather than what the unexamined judgment assigned is a significantly more sustainable and significantly less painful way to move through a life. Here is the thing about the ancient trick that most modern presentations miss. It is not about strength. Most content about Stoicism positions it as a form of toughness, the ability to absorb difficulty without showing it, the refusal to be moved, the performance of invulnerability. That is the misunderstanding. The Stoic practice is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming clearer, clear about what actually matters, clear about what actually matters, clear about what is actually in your control, clear about what other people's behavior actually reflects, clear about the difference between the event and the meaning assigned to it, clear about what the next right action is regardless of the emotional noise of the moment. That clarity is not hardness. It is more like the quality of a still pond, not because nothing disturbs it, but because it returns to stillness, not through effort, through the nature of what it is. The person who has practiced the Stoic discipline long enough develops something like that quality, not invulnerability, the ability to be moved without being swept away, to feel the disturbance and let it pass, to return to the clarity that was there before the event arrived, and that is there again after the event has passed. That return is the practice, not the prevention of the disturbance. The return. Here is something about what never getting hurt again actually means, because the title is honest but requires clarification. The ancient trick does not make you immune to hurt. Nothing does. To be alive is to be vulnerable. To care is to be at risk. To love is to eventually face loss. The hurt is the price of engagement with life, and engagement with life is worth more than the protection from the price. What the ancient trick actually provides is different and more valuable than immunity. It provides the ability to distinguish between the pain that is inherent in the situation and the additional suffering that is produced by the judgment you wrap around the pain. The grief at genuine loss is appropriate and real and should be felt. The interpretation of the loss as evidence that life is cruel and that you are specifically targeted by misfortune and that nothing good will last is not the grief. It is the judgment added to the grief. That judgment is what produces the suffering that extends beyond the grief itself. The ancient trick removes the judgment, not the grief. It removes the part of the hurt that was not actually caused by what happened, that was caused by what you believed about what happened. And that part, which is often larger than the original pain, is genuinely available to be reduced, not through spiritual bypass, results, not through pretending the pain is not there, through the honest examination of what is actually happening versus what you are telling yourself is happening. And that examination, practiced consistently over time, produces a genuinely freer relationship with the inevitable pain of a human life. Not free from the pain, free within it, which is the most that is actually available, and which, it turns out, is enough. Here is where we leave this. Not with a summary, not with a reminder to think stoically, with the one practice that makes everything else possible. The pause between the event and the response, between what happened and what you decide it means, between the automatic judgment and the examined one. Just the pause. In that pause, one question: is the pain coming from what actually happened, or from what I believe about what happened? If the answer is what actually happened, feel it fully. Grief, disappointment, anger at genuine injustice. These are real and deserve real acknowledgement. If the answer is what I believe about what happened, examine the belief. Is this belief accurate? Is it based on what is actually here, or on what the pattern predicts? Is this the thing itself, or the meaning I attached to the thing? That examination does not require philosophy. It requires the pause long enough to ask, and the pause is always available, even in the hardest moments, even when the automatic is running at full speed, even when the pattern is most insistent. 3 seconds. One question: what is this actually about? That question, asked honestly in the pause, is the ancient trick, not a technique, not a method, not a system. A question practiced for 2,000 years by people in circumstances more extreme than yours, who discovered that the question, asked honestly, changed what they could endure, not by making the hard things easy, by making them proportionate. And proportionate is enough. Proportionate is, it turns out, exactly enough.